Francisco Goya, one of the most versatile, prolific, and influential artists of Spain, was born unheralded in this harsh and windswept land on March 30th, 1746. His native town of Fuendetodos belonged to the province of Aragon, still feudal. Its deserted towns and empty granaries mute witness to the burdens of continual wars. It was a hard, harsh place to live. Insufficient rain threatened those who worked the poor soil with antique tools. Rigid society and poor roads offered few dreams of escape. Young Goya experienced these depredations only indirectly, for his parents lived mainly in Saragossa. He spent only the tranquil days of summer in Aragon. His father was a gilder by profession and apprenticed him to José Luzan, a minor painter of the Aragonese school. Goya spent 4 years in Luzan's studio, learning to draw by copying prints. His experience here did nothing to help uncover his genius, but left him with a lifelong hatred of dull and empty art. The royal court in Madrid was sparkling with new artistic ideas and talents. Goya was 17 when he first competed for a scholarship in Madrid. He was rejected. He left his signature on various works in his birthplace, Fuendetodos, in Remolinos, and in Muel. His prestige grew, and when he returned to Saragossa, commissions poured in. In Saragossa, he painted murals for the Cathedral of Our Lady of Pilar, and some years later, the famous dome of the Queen of Martyrs. Francisco Bayu, whom Goya had met at Luzan's studios, was in charge of the overall decoration and offered Goya the opportunity of collaborating with him. Goya did so in a vigorous and simple style, without, however, much hint of originality. In 1773, he married Bayu's sister, Josefa. But during this period, Goya began to demonstrate a characteristic restlessness. He submitted some sketches to the town council, and when the council rejected them, Goya threatened to walk out. Peace was made by Brother Luis de Saucedo, a monk from a neighboring monastery, Aula Dei. We are not certain when Goya painted the Aula Dei murals, whether in his youth or later, when he was already at the court and returned to Saragossa to visit. He may have begun the murals at the urging of Brother Luis. Certainly, Goya had visited the Aula Dei as a child, accompanying his father, who carried out gilding work at the monastery. Goya's style here is rather anti-Baroque. It covers large, somewhat theatrical spaces in which solitary figures break out of the depths of light-colored distances. The local tradition has it that Goya painted these when he was 30 years old and had just returned from Italy. Tradition also has it that the monks thought highly of them, though it does not explain why they were left unfinished. The explanation is not hard to find. Like a lure, like a siren, Madrid called. Goya left for Madrid. Goya was commissioned to paint a picture in the church of San Francisco el Grande. Goya's painting of Saint Bernardine of Siena, preaching in the presence of King Alfonso V, would later be adjudged the best of all the altar pictures. He portrayed himself as one of the characters in the picture. Madrid at this time was a small and provincial town with a countrified nobility and a population of some 200,000 people. A town of 20 parishes, some 60 convents, 5 jails, 2 theaters, and the Caños del Peral Theater for lovers of the opera. Madrid was a changing town, an optimistic town, full of lively streets and plazas, inns and taverns, with interested and interesting people, attractive people, clergymen, wealthy women, working men. Goya depicted this still confident world in its times of joy and its times of sorrow, its moments of leisure and its bitter, self-critical times. Those were the days when Madrileños, in their spare time, would go down to the riverbank and dream of a better tomorrow. Goya painted the entire tapestry of Spanish life, the wistful young girl, the young peasant, the joys of harvest time and the harvest dances, the continuity of working the land. Goya painted summer musings, summer promises. The harvest time of the grape, of baskets filled to the brim, a promise of wine that lightens the burden. He painted the darker season, too. Winter, enemy of the poor, with its ash-colored skies. The hustle and bustle of the market on a holiday contrast with the shivering of children who cry from cold and hunger. He painted dashing young men, handsome, manly, macho young men. He shows us gamblers, rowdies, card sharks, the faces of the cards depicting their crookedness. Beneath the surface of gaming lurks a deadly, explosive seriousness. He shows us rich people who ride around the market in a carriage with footmen. The world seems better that way, insulated by glass from the dirty, surging humanity outside. A wedding party approaches. A child shouts, "Long live the bride and groom," and other children join in the cry. The musicians measure the tempo of the group. The bride's friends watch with undisguised malice. But why that look? What are those two guests whispering? Not even the beggar hides his sarcasm, nor the priest. Why is the grandfather bowing his head? Why is the father so apologetic? The bride is lovely. Her dress is rich, made of lace and silk, just as she wanted. Fit for a queen, just as she wanted. And what shall we say about the groom? With silver buckles on his shoes, an elegant, trimmed coat. Look, here's the groom. This is his face. This is the couple. a marriage not made for love. The group slowly moves toward the church. But all weddings have a happy epilogue. After the ceremony, beside the river, there will be toasts to the newlyweds, wine and a light meal. Wine softens memories. Drink, sing, enjoy the afternoon. Today is a day of celebration by the river. There will be time enough for pain and tears, for regrets. When evening falls on the open field, the party is still going on beside the Manzanares River. Day ends, a day like any other on the outskirts of Madrid, a day in an age that would soon be gone forever. Goya created all these cartoons for the Royal Tapestry Factory of Santa Barbara. In keeping with the king's taste in tapestry, no more mythological or biblical scenes. Instead, scenes of Spanish life and Spanish costume. Goya's cartoons enlarged the entire craft of tapestry making through the breadth of his scope, the warmth of his colors, and the humanity of his subject matter. But tapestry cartoons were not the way to fame. For one could see them only in the artist's studio or at the tapestry workshop. Fame would come only from painting portraits. His life began to be a steady parade of portraits, of faces, gestures, poses. The Count of Floridablanca is depicted with stiffness and formality, ignoring Goya, whom he dwarfs, and whose gift of art he seems to spurn. Yet Goya's prestige at court was growing daily, while that of his mediocre rivals waned. The doors of the most prestigious and distinguished houses of Spain were opened to him. Aristocrats and bourgeois sat for portraits by Goya. It was extremely fashionable to have one's portrait painted by Goya, who worked with tremendous speed, and yet always with great skill and insight. He was court painter to King Charles III. Charles IV named him Painter of the Royal Household. He painted the Queen, Maria Luisa, and he painted her rival, the Duchess of Alba, with whose life Goya's would be forever linked. He painted the most famous actress of the day, Rosario Fernandez, known as La Tirana. Goya also painted the actor, Máquez. But for theater that really engaged the passions, Spaniards turned to the bullring, rich and poor, men and women. Spaniards gave themselves up with a passion to to this spectacle, a chaotic and bloody spectacle, in which the onlookers took part as well. Sometimes, after the first flourishes with the cape, the runaway bull would jump the barrier. The mayor of the town died that way, gored by a furious bull on a sunny afternoon. Day after day, people risked their lives, and many died. Well-placed banderillas, fearful gorings that the best footwork could not prevent. Hand firm, a sword thrust by Pedro Romero, rival of the famous Costillares. The insanities of Martinchos in the bullring of Madrid. The death of Pepe Hillo, over which the whole country wept. Brave bulls against the courage of men. Timid bulls belong to the angry dogs. Thus, the amusement of field and pasture lands moved into the city. Bullfights and feasts of saints quickly became the chief entertainment. And once a year, every year, the streets would echo with the slow beat of the processional drum as the hooded penitents marched, seeking absolution for their sins. Faith ran deep in Spain at the threshold of the 19th century. But faith was not enough to overcome the problems which faced the country. Physical poverty and hunger, intellectual failure, boredom, lethargy, apathy.
De las mujeres piadosas, patrono misericordia, ante la reja bendita de tu imagen sacrosanta, una gracia hoy te piden las mujeres de esta casa. Un hijo mayor tenía, el hijo que más amaba. Hijo por quien más sufría, porque en él más se miraba. Acusado hoy ha sido, acusado ante los jueces, cara de lobo rencor, tiene quien perderle quiere. Unos callan, otros miran, otros piensan en silencio. Todos saben que su hijo no es asesino del muerto. Sin embargo, ¿quién dirá palabras a su favor? Testigos no hay de la muerte, San Antonio ampáralo. Hijo de tan buena madre, mujer de tal corazón, libre has de ser, dijo el santo, y el muerto resucitó.
Now Goya was commissioned to decorate the little church of San Francisco de la Florida, a task he executed swiftly, superbly, and with a glance deep into the soul of Spain. Goya became very ill and totally lost his sense of hearing. In his new solitude, he found extra room for observation. He ceased trying to please with his art. He began to depict the underside of Spain. Many reasons combined explain Goya's change of style, of viewpoint, of purpose. Deafness, compounded by the fear of onsetting blindness. The deep political and social turmoil in Spain. His own continuing search for new artistic discovery. His subject matter shifted from the rational to the absurd. Revealing a world both fantastic and human, exploding with rage and venom at all the fancy folk, the rich and famous people he had for so long borne with smiles. The pampered, bratty children of the rich, who must have plagued him when he had to paint their portraits. Incompetent professors who barely knew the subjects they were teaching. Musicians without soul. And doctors without cures. In his youth, in his health, he had painted their faces in order to please them. Now, he engraved their souls to express himself. The function of art, he said, is to criticize society. His deafness did not merely shut out sounds of the outside, but left him with roaring sounds from which he could not escape inside his own head. His imagination was filled with strange phantasms. The concrete and real world was filled with corruption and decadence. Now, Goya experienced further torment under fire. He fell in love with the Duchess of Alba, the most beautiful and the most notorious of the highly placed ladies at court. He was nearly old enough to be her father. He loved her, stayed with her while she was in mourning for her husband, and of course, was seared to the heart by her fickleness. Goya painted or engraved a whole palette of evils: pride, envy, avarice, sloth, and all the other sins, and added the perversion of selling oneself to the highest bidder. His tribute to the Duchess of Alba. Fair sex, you listen to the promises of beaux. Advice from bawds and gossips. Old ladies, hags, and crones. Think while dressing for the ball, while gartering your limbs, before it is too late. Think, your beauty too will fade. And soon or late, beauty extracts its price. Pernicious death or niggling old age are the wages of mortal flesh. Goya's last assignment at the court was to paint Godoy, Prime Minister and lover of the Queen. A good patron, Godoy, the two Mayas belonged to him. The Mayas clothed and naked. Each painting reflects a woman sure of her beauty and her world. Goya paints himself into this portrait of Charles IV and his family. The painting of the royal family sums up an epoch, outwardly serene, festering beneath. Spain had been at war with France in the early 1790s. Now, she was allied with Napoleon, now in his very prime. French troops were stationed all over Spain. The Spanish heir to the throne, fearful of court intrigue, made a deal with Napoleon. The king and queen fled for their lives, and Napoleon marched into Madrid. But if the nobility, the leadership of Spain, was ready to accommodate itself to the French, the citizenry of Madrid was not. On the night of May 1st, 1808, they rose up against Napoleon. The din of battle in the streets of Madrid roused patriotic fervor. How much crueler could man be to man? A night of cold terror, of reprisal. The humiliation of defeat inspired new fervor. Women leapt into battle beside their men. cruel death for being caught with a weapon. A vicious clubbing, the punishment for carrying a knife. How inhuman can men become when crazed by hatred? The clergy fled before Napoleon's troops. The invading soldiers looted, burned, set everything to the torch. Villages and hamlets were deserted. Across the fields, outside the towns, the summer sun shone on the silent face of death. Goya was mad with anger and pity and horror. With a gun in one hand and his notebook in the other, he painted death and agony in the act. The brutality and courage of individual men and women, not the statistics of war, but individual men and women sacrificed, broken, tormented, turned into nameless flesh. Children of nothingness to fertilize the soil or feed ravaging wolves. Goya, once the painter of frivolous riverside idyls, of decorative tapestries, of fat infantas and their ugly lovers, painted the face of depravity. Asked how he could bear to paint such horror, he said, "To have the pleasure of telling men forever to stop being barbarians." Soldiers and bystanders were buried side by side. Disease ravaged the country. Hunger and starvation were the common lot. Aristocrats and nobles were trying to appease the French, buy time, feather their own nests. When their leaders deserted them, the citizenry fought by themselves to defend their homes, their honor, their freedom. Men, women, children, artisans, farmers, priests, together. The death toll in Madrid was staggering. It included Josefa Bayou, Goya's wife. Piety became a source of solace to many, religion a safe refuge. Goya had painted many devotional pictures before. With The Last Communion of St. Joseph of Calasanz, Goya produced one of his crowning masterpieces, a work of intense emotion, a divinely lit, saintly piece. Goya was 73 years old. How often he had portrayed himself in some element of his paintings. Did he see himself now as one of the choir boys, looking towards his own spiritual salvation? The end of the war with France brought new troubles to Spain, years of terror and repression. For Francophiles, liberals, and those suspected of either, there were trials, sentences, exile, execution. Swarms of informers and spies infested the cities. Spaniard betrayed Spaniard. The streets and jails teemed with new victims en route to the scaffold. Goya, aging and infirm, withdrew into himself, where slowly the hallucinations of reality were transformed into the vision of art. Was he a mad misanthrope or a messenger of God, holding a mirror to the fall of man? What is unreal to man is made real in the paintings of Goya. Goya himself was not to be spared. The Inquisition summoned him on grounds he had painted the obscene Maya naked. Goya could hope for no more commissions from the court. Though Goya was grudgingly forgiven for his obscene painting, he left Madrid forever. Goya's last companion was Doña Leocadia Weiss, more than 40 years his junior. Intimations of approaching civil war disturbed the peace once more. Once more, Spaniards would fight against Spaniards. Spain would devour her own. final years of his life were spent chiefly in France. Though half blind, he continued to paint, continued to develop. Renoir had not been born when Goya painted The Milkmaid of Bordeaux. He died in Bordeaux on April 16th, 1828. At last, Francisco de Goya y Lucientes returned to his beloved riverside. Painter of Spain, universal artist from the Aragonese province, he lies beside the unknown heroes of Spanish history. The same sun which lit up their lives has erased their names. We know them now only as Juan, Jose, or Carmen, or Manuela, or as Maria del Pilar Cayetana de Silva, Duchess of Alba, cut down in the prime of life. Of Goya's Madrid, little remains, save a vista of churches, streets, some palaces, and memories. Recorded, shaped, and kept alive in Goya's work. Without his work, some part of Spain would have been lost. Some part of Spain would never have been known. Would never have recognized itself, or been understood by others. Spaniard, craftsman, artist. Simple and sophisticated, lover of bullfights, and painter of kings, of decadent aristocrats and thriving shopkeepers, of saints and sinners. A passionate lover and wandering husband, a humble man and sometime courtier, a tortured man possessed of a vision, a genius. What he loved and what he painted is his testament and Spain's.